The world's fastest keyboard just got smarter and sexier. Last year, this video sponsor SteelSeries released the Apex Pro TKL Gen 3, delivering industry-leading speed, responsiveness, and customization. It's the keyboard I personally use, and I love it, and now it's available in a gleaming white finish that looks sick as hell. It just launched, and you can get a 12% discount on it when you use offer code SKILLUP over at SteelSeries.com. Stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, I am back from Japan where I was checking out Death Stranding 2 on the beach. That's the name of the game, by the way. I wasn't checking out Death Stranding 2 while on a beach. Are there even beaches in Tokyo? I haven't actually checked. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. Point is, I am back and ready for an absolutely huge month. Death Stranding 2 preview goes up next week. We got Doom Dark Ages dropping May 15th, Elden Ring Night Rain at the end of the month, and then wouldn't you know it, Key 3 kicks off in early June, marking the official beginning of the 2025 hype season. Did Jeff manage to snag a GTA 6 release date reveal trailer as part of his showcase? I doubt it. Usually publishers have to pay Jeff for the pleasure of appearing in one of his webinars, but when it comes to Rockstar and GTA 6, I suspect it to be Jeff paying top dollar to get one of their trailers onto his run sheet. Hey, speaking of GTA 6, did you guys hear about this Borderlands 4 release date change thing that apparently has nothing to do with GTA 6? Okay, so before we begin, I feel like I should issue a content warning. The following story does contain images of and quotes from Randy Pitchford, so viewer discretion is advised. Recently, Randy took to Twitter to debut a new look and reveal that Borderlands 4 is shipping earlier than planned. He says that development is going better than expected, best case scenario in fact. He says the team is cooking and the game is excellent, and as a result of that sterling progress, Borderlands 4 will now ship on September 12th, which is 11 days earlier than previously planned. Now, it's not entirely unheard of for a game to ship early, but most of the time when that happens, it's to avoid the blast zone of another bigger game. For example, earlier this year, Sega shipped Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza a week earlier than planned so it wouldn't be competing with Monster Hunter Wilds. When Factorio released out of early access in 2020, it shipped a full month early in order to avoid Cyberpunk. Obviously, you can see where all this is going, but if you can't, maybe you're missing a crucial piece of the puzzle, so let me fill you in. Borderlands is published by 2K Games. 2K Games is owned by Take-Two Interactive. Take-Two Interactive publish a little game you might have heard of, Grand Theft Auto. So you can see why the announcement that Borderlands 4 is shipping earlier than planned has gotten a lot of attention. The speculation is that Randy received word from up on high about the GTA 6 release date, and so he's moved his game forward a week to give it some breathing room. Now, to be clear, Randy has directly addressed this speculation and debunked it, saying, quote, Borderlands 4 shipping early is 100% the result of confidence in the game and development trajectory, backed by actual tasks and bug find/fix rates. Our decision is literally 0% about any other product's actual or theoretical launch date, end quote, to which the entire internet replied, sure, Randy, sure. I mean, look, it could be true what he's saying, but it would just be so weird to move a game's release date up after having announced it, especially when we're only talking about like 11 days. There's also the reality that Randy Pitchford absolutely knows when GTA 6 is launching, or at the very least knows the window, because there's no way his publisher would let Borderlands 4 be crushed by the extinction level meteor that is GTA 6's arrival. So if I was a betting man, I'd bet that Randy knows something we don't and wanted to put as much space between his game and GTA 6 as possible. But like I said, that is pure speculation. We do not know. What we do know is that Sony just hosted a special state of play devoted entirely to Borderlands 4, and it's looking pretty good. Still very much the Borderlands we know and love, but the team are promising a more grounded tone here, which I'm sure is code for fewer cringe-inducing jokes. More focus on verticality is nice, movement tech seems to be a big thing here. It's looking like familiar fun, and like Randy says, it now arrives on September 12th for all platforms bar Switch, but it does include Switch 2, and honestly, Borderlands 4 launching on Switch 2 is kind of cool, so respect to Gearbox for making that happen. There was some speculation that perhaps Gearbox moved the day to avoid the launch of Marathon, which was announced for the same day as Borderlands 4's original release date, September 23rd. I'm gonna go ahead and say that this is pretty unlikely. I mean, firstly, these are very, very different games chasing totally different audiences. If Bungie were dropping a major Destiny expansion at the time, I'd be like, sure, that makes sense. You don't want to have two looter shooters going head to head. But I don't think Borderlands 4 has much to fear from the likes of Marathon. Doubly so, given all of the leading indicators surrounding Marathon's reveal and the reception it's been getting during its closed alpha period. There is an alpha test live right now, wrapping up really soon. It was originally meant to be a closed alpha test where people were not allowed to stream or upload gameplay or even publicly share their impressions. Bungie lifted that restriction after a fairly tepid response to the game's initial reveal, with dispiriting dislike ratios on YouTube uploads and lukewarm impressions from creators and media. So the alpha test has been live for the past week, and new waves of people have been invited in at regular intervals, but the numbers aren't really doing what they're supposed to be doing. You can actually see player counts for technical tests since the clients have Steam IDs like anything else on Steam, and you can see that Marathon peaked at 6,900 players and has been trending sharply downwards since that, despite the fact that, as I said, additional waves of players were invited in. Now, on the one hand, you can't read into these numbers too deeply. The alpha is not as content-rich as the full game will be, and it's not finished in the sense that there are big chunks of the game not present in this build. But having said that, this is a genre that's defined first and foremost by its core gameplay hook, that thing that keeps you coming back and back and back. And at the face of it, people are not coming back to Marathon. They're not desperately logging in to squeeze every available hour out of the alpha window. Many of them seem to log in, give it a go for a bit, get their fill, and then peace out. Same sort of thing seems to be happening over on Twitch, where you can see viewership interest in Marathon sharply declining from the launch peak of around 40 to 50,000 players down to as few as 1.3k players yesterday. So look, again, these numbers do need to be viewed in context. I don't think they spell certain doom for Marathon, but I think the reality is that they're just not very good numbers. You'd want to see that player base returning day after day, and ideally you'd want to see it growing, given that you're inviting more people in over time. Personally, I think it's emblematic of what I experienced when I played Marathon at Bungie HQ, which is to say that it's a good game, it's well made, but it's missing that hook that really makes you want to do one more run. Until Bungie are able to find that, I think Marathon is going to struggle. Big week for extraction shooters this week, actually. Marathon's technical test is live, as is the test for Arc Raiders, another sci-fi extraction shooter. What if I told you that there was a third sci-fi extraction shooter on the way? You'd probably say, that's 3 too many, thank you very much. Well, I'd say who might agree with you, EA boss Andy Wilson, because this week he cancelled a Respawn-made extraction shooter set in the Titanfall universe, and he sacked over 300 EA staff while doing it. I wish I was joking, but I am definitely not. This story comes courtesy of Bloomberg, and here are the facts as they report them. Respawn, makers of Apex Legends, but before that Titanfall, were working on a new extraction shooter which was set in the Titanfall universe. Now, don't get too excited about that last part, since technically speaking, Apex Legends is also set in the Titanfall universe, so that setting doesn't automatically mean advanced movement tech and big robots falling from the sky. The project was codenamed R7 and was apparently not close to release. We have no other information on it at this time. I do think the timing of this announcement is quite interesting. Marathon gets a really tepid reception, and a few weeks later, EA announced they're canning Respawn's sci-fi extraction shooter. I mean, the two could be completely unrelated, but I don't know. Anyway, in conjunction with this cancellation, EA did what EA does best: fire people. Between 300 to 400 people lost their jobs, with IGN reporting that over 100 of those were at Respawn, and the others spread out across the other parts of EA's business, including development, publishing, and QA. In a particularly galling story, one Respawn employee was sacked the day after the character she wrote was revealed to the world. Heather Woodward had been working on a new Apex character called Sparrow for months now, and the very day after the character reveal trailer went up, Woodward received her pink slip. What should have been a moment of celebration in her career ultimately turned into a moment of misery, also that EA could continue to make the line go ever up. Speaking of which, EA did issue a statement on the cancellations and job cuts saying, quote, "As part of our continued focus on our long-term strategic priorities, we've made select changes within our organization that more effectively aligns teams and allocates resources in service of driving future growth," end quote. As always, genuinely interested to see how much of a pay cut Andy Wilson will have to take this year in service to this important goal, but I suspect that number will be at or near zero. So there you have it. Respawn were working on a new Titanfall thing, which wasn't Titanfall 3, and now they're just working on Apex Legends and the new Star Wars game, only they're doing it with reduced headcount and with the added pressure to get Apex Legends back on track, since player counts and engagement missed the mark big time in 2024. Doesn't look like an easy time ahead for Respawn, so hopefully the staff still working there can make it through this patchy period unscathed. Turning now to other news, a major update in Epic's 4-year-long battle with Apple over the way they charge for in-app transactions. This almost feels like ancient history at this point, but back in 2020, Epic rolled out an update to Fortnite for iOS and Android devices that allowed people to pay Epic directly for in-game purchases, sidestepping the platform payment process and the 30% cut those platforms take. Epic CEO Tim Sweeney argued that the 30% cut was egregious and that the platform holders were operating as monopolies, bullying app makers to pay because said app makers had literally no other choice. Epic took those platforms to court and won a hollow victory. Various courts around the world ruled that those platforms should provide alternative payment processes, but in an ingenious act of disingenuous compliance, Apple asserted that they could still demand a cut of transactions that happen through those alternative payment processes, meaning that developers would still have to pay roughly 30%. Epic, of course, challenged this, and today they got the victory they'd been chasing since this whole ordeal began. The presiding judge was frankly very pissed at Apple. Quote, Apple willfully chose not to comply with this court's injunction. It did so with the express intent to create new anti-competitive barriers which would, by design and in effect, maintain a valued revenue stream, a revenue stream previously found to be anti-competitive. That it thought this court would tolerate such insubordination was a gross miscalculation. As always, the cover-up made it worse. For this court, there is no second bite at the apple, end quote. The judge was so pissed, in fact, that they're actually referring the matter to the Californian Attorney General so they might explore whether or not criminal contempt charges are warranted. Ouch. As for the ruling itself, the judge has said that Apple will now no longer be able to claim any revenue from transactions made outside of the iOS ecosystem. That means that apps can now direct customers to third-party sites to process payments, keeping the vast majority of that revenue for themselves. This is absolutely massive, to be honest with you. That 30% cut is a huge revenue stream for Apple, and it's impossible to imagine a scenario where that revenue stream is not greatly diminished by this ruling, as most apps will now look to migrate towards payment solutions that charge significantly less than 30%. That's invariably going to cause Apple to lower their rate to entice apps to stay with them as a payments provider. That's obviously going to have flow-on impacts on Google, who are no doubt going to have to play by the same rules and meet the same price pressures. It's huge. It's so huge that we might even see Fortnite back on the App Store real soon, as Tim Sweeney has posted a peace proposal where he agrees to drop all litigation against Apple so long as they fully comply with the ruling and get Fortnite back on the App Store post-haste. It's been a long and extraordinarily expensive battle for Epic these past 4 years, but Epic has finally triumphed in a case that might genuinely lead to a better future for app makers and consumers. So congrats, Tim Sweeney. Now that you've bested Apple, how about giving the Epic Games Store a bit of a tune-up? I think it needs it. Sticking with lawsuit news a little longer, here's an interesting one. IGN owner Ziff Davis is suing OpenAI for copyright infringement. The court filing reveals that Ziff Davis alleges that OpenAI, quote, intentionally and relentlessly reproduced exact copies and created derivatives of Ziff Davis work, end quote, by using Ziff Davis content to train large language models for its chatbot without permission, and in so doing, falsely attributed output to Ziff Davis that was not Ziff Davis content, and falsely attributed Ziff Davis content to other parties, end quote. It follows similar lawsuits from other media outlets, including the New York Times, The Intercept, Raw Story, and Alternet, all alleging that OpenAI used their content in various ways without their permission. And it's like, yeah, of course they did. I still remember that interview with the OpenAI executive when they were asked about whether or not YouTube videos were being fed to ChatGPT, and the face this woman made when she tried to avoid answering that question was a genuine all-timer. Ziff Davis owns IGN, Eurogamer, GamesIndustry.biz, and a number of other gaming outlets, so this lawsuit is definitely relevant to the world of video games coverage. But don't assume it's about punitive damages. Previously, OpenAI signed a deal with Future Publishing, which owns PC Gamer, Games Radar, and Retro Gamer. That deal presumably lets OpenAI train their models on content from those sites. So it's possible that Ziff Davis are just looking for a similar deal, since most modern media conglomerates would absolutely outsource a majority of editorial to AI if they could get away with it. It's dark times for media and games media in particular, but that's a whole other video, so we'll save that for another day. A quick lightning round to finish off. Remember a few weeks ago when we covered that story about Nexon trying to make a new StarCraft game and get the rights to Overwatch on mobile? Well, it appears as though they won. Korean outlet MTN is reporting that Nexon has won the rights to develop a new StarCraft game, though we have absolutely no idea what sort of game that might be because, frankly speaking, RTS games aren't all that popular these days. They also won the rights to bring Overwatch to mobile in Japan and Korea, and given that this would be the first time Overwatch would appear on mobile devices, it's likely that that same port would eventually make its way westward. You thought Overwatch 2 monetization was already bad? Wait till Nexon gets their hands on it. Some very interesting adaptation news now. That recently announced split fiction adaptation seems to be moving ahead, and you won't guess who signed on to star. Sydney Sweeney. That is not a joke, by the way. Sydney Sweeney is actually starring in this movie if it ever gets made. Personally, I would have liked to have seen her reunited with Glenn Powell in an adaptation of It Takes Two, but I'll take what I can get. Believe it or not though, that is not the only Sydney Sweeney video game adaptation news we have this week. I shit you not. In addition to being announced as the star of Split Fiction, it was also announced that they're making a movie based on Sega's classic arcade racing series Outrun, and that Sydney Sweeney would be producing it, and I guess we assume also starring in it. And get this, Michael Bay is going to direct this movie. Like, the Michael Bay. The man is stepping away from like 2 decades of making Transformers movies so he can make an Outrun movie, probably starring Sydney Sweeney. Can you imagine how unbelievably peak this movie is going to be? No release date for this one yet, but I'm going to be hopping in line down to the local IMAX right after I finish this script because I simply cannot wait for this movie. Turning now to more serious news, Nintendo is on the hunt for the person responsible for the Pokemon Terror Leak, which happened in October of last year. One of the most catastrophic leaks in video video game history, the hacker got hold of personal information of Game Freak employees, source code for Pokemon Legends ZA, concept art, old game builds, and information about upcoming film and television projects. Sadly, the hackers were not able to find any documentation that might explain why modern-day Pokemon games look like games released back in 2004, but I'm sure that documentation has a few extra layers of security on it. Jokes aside, it was a devastating leak for Game Freak and Nintendo have filed a subpoena to Discord asking them to turn over the personal information attached to the hacker's Discord account. No word yet on if Discord will comply or use block to reject the motion. That's a Pokemon reference, by the way. Hope you like that one. Some quick sales milestones to top you off. Elden Ring, 30 million units. Not much else to say about that one. Oblivion Remastered, 4 million players in 3 days. Morrowind next, please, Todd. Resident Evil 4 Remake, 10 million units. When will they remake the remake? That's the question we'd be asking if Sony was publishing this one. And finally, remember Rematch? They had a beta recently and it went absolutely gangbusters, peaking at over 133,000 concurrent players. Who'd have thought that a game based on soccer would be so popular? So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, it's certainly been a quieter week as publishers and developers are no doubt starting to hold onto their cards in preparation for Summer Games Fest and all the other showcases happening in a month's time. But a few new games did pop up this week. One of them is kind of a remake, but not really. No, I'm not referring to Oblivion, but Frostpunk 1886, which 11-Bit Studios mentioned in an investor call last week before officially announcing it a few days later. This is a complete overhaul and reimagining of the strategy management game, which came out in 2018, which really isn't that long ago when you think about it. The studio says, though, that this game was built on their old in-house tech and it's become difficult to keep it up to date, so they're remaking it in Unreal Engine 5 and taking the chance to add new content as well as build it for mod support so it can keep going forever. It might initially seem like a weird choice given that Frostpunk 2 just came out. The 2 definitely takes a pretty different approach to the same concept, and the original game still very much holds up. Having said all of that, this kind of does feel a bit like that Horizon Zero Dawn remake where we were all asking ourselves, is this really necessary? The second new game this week is another punk game, if you can believe it. It's called Mycopunk, and it's a new game being published by Devolver Digital from a new US outfit called Pigeons at Play. If you ever thought, man, I wish someone made Borderlands, but without the cringe, then this might be up your alley. It's a colorful, cel-shaded first-person co-op shooter with a weapon system focused on an excess of customization and 4 different character classes. The difference here is that it takes on a kind of mission or run-based approach to the looting and shooting. Also, the primary enemy are futuristic mushrooms, I think. This one's releasing into PC Early Access sometime this year, and they released a free demo of the game alongside the announcement, so take a look at that if your interest is at all piqued. Wanted to do a quick shout out to the gang at Playdate, who held a little showcase to talk about their second season of games. At the end of May, they'll be releasing 2 new games each week for 6 weeks, and the idea is that Playdate owners can buy into the whole lot and have some kind of shared social experience too. One of the big games headlining this is Fulcrum Defender, which is a brand new title from Subset Games, better known as the indie studio behind one of the all-time great strategy games FTL and Into the Breach. They've been pretty quiet for a while. As it turns out, one of the 2 key people at the studio got hit hard with long COVID, which put a huge dent in their projects, and Fulcrum Defender is a small-scale game to ease them back into things. It's a bit different from their strategy stuff. It's a crank-controlled arcade defense/survival game, which looks like it could be a good sort of pick-up, put-down kind of game, since these folks have sure proven that they know how to make a good replayable video game. Another notable one from Playdate Season 2 that caught our eye was Shadowgate, which is based on the first-person dungeon crawler from the 1980s. This one is leaning on that 1-bit screen for its retro vibes, and it's kind of great for a device like this. There's also this nice-looking one called Taria and Como, a narrative puzzle platformer with a neat physics-based grappling hook mechanic, and it's also produced by Academy Award-winning actress Viola Davis. Alright, sure, why not? Skimming through some release dates now, Sony has decided to be one of the first braving the possible GTA 6 blast zone. They've set October 2nd for the Ghost of Yotei release date, but given the fact that Rockstar haven't yet announced a release date for GTA 6, I'm going to go ahead and say that any other release date announcement for the year-end period is purely placeholder. They released a new story trailer to go along with this announcement, which looks really good. Definitely very excited to return to Sucker Punch's Japan ASAP. Remedy has also set a release date for their upcoming co-op FPS set in the Control universe, FBC Firebreak. This one's dropping on June 17th for all platforms bar Switch, which is becoming an increasingly crowded month, especially with the Switch 2 sure to suck up a good chunk of people's playtime. Still always down for Remedy's brand of weirdness, and hopefully Firebreak will have at least some of that for us to chew on. Historical Chinese Souls-like Wu Chang Fallen Feathers has set a release date for the 27th of July this year, steering well clear of Elden Ring Night Reign, which comes out at the end of May. Before that, though, on July 17th, we're getting the chance to take care of unfinished business. And by unfinished business, I mean play more RoboCop Rogue City, because that's when this standalone expansion comes out. This one is basically like, what if RoboCop was in that Carl Urban Dread movie and he just had to storm his way through a skyscraper full of criminal scum? Perfect formula, impossible for this to be anything but good. If I'm wrong, this conversation never happened. A couple of wildcard announcements now, and look, I try to avoid talking too much about the bonkers shit happening in Fortnite all the time, but at Star Wars Celebration last week, they announced that they were doing yet another Star Wars themed season, and it's clear that Epic is now too powerful, and Disney are just like, sure, do whatever you want to keep the cash rolling in, because the headliner here is Darth Jar Jar. Yes, that fucking guy from the prequel trilogy. He's back, and apparently he's a powerful Sith Lord now, and that is canon, at least in Fortnite, not for real. Now, I can let Darth Jar Jar slide because that's just a bit of fun, but this next one, and I cannot believe I'm about to do this, somehow NFTs have returned, courtesy of Ubisoft. This one went relatively unnoticed, but we have to bring it up because what the fuck? Ubisoft have announced a new game in its Might and Magic series, a classic franchise that many people, myself included, have extremely fond memories for. And they're going to use this license to release a free-to-play mobile card game with blockchain elements. This will be the company's third blockchain game in as many years, and it comes after they spent the last few months closing down a bunch of studios, laying off developers, and trying to fend off their angry shareholders at the gates. Granted, they're not developing this one themselves. They've asked an Australian blockchain developer called Immutable to do it for them, a company that had a similar blockchain card game a few years ago that tanked so hard that they had to let the whole team go. In a since-deleted tweet, the official account for the game Slurp Juice this out, quote, Web3 gaming is inevitable, end quote. Well, Ubisoft, I have my own predictions for what is and what is not inevitable, but I'll keep those to myself for now. Just one delay announcement this week, and it's for La Quimera, the cyberpunk shooter from the team formerly known as 4A Ukraine. This one was a very, very last-minute delay, like so last minute that it happened after the review embargo dropped for the game. Only a few outlets took it on, but none of the reviews were glowing, suggesting that it looked great, but it was incomplete, buggy, and short. Needless to say, being based in Ukraine, there's surely a lot of stuff making development of this game very difficult. No new release date for this title yet, so do stay tuned. So what came out last week? Well, we already discussed some of the Oblivion Remaster reception last week, but how's it doing 1 week later? Well, it's currently sitting at a strong 82 on OpenCritic. The critics are naturally a bit mixed on the way that this 20-year-old game was brought back to life. GameSpot absolutely loved it, embracing the jank. They gave it an 8 out of 10, saying, quote, had Bethesda Game Studios and Virtua Studios rebuilt Oblivion from the ground up with the intent of matching or exceeding Skyrim, they would have missed the point. Oblivion isn't Oblivion without its weird persuasion mechanic that I still don't fully understand almost 20 years later. These rough edges are what give Oblivion character, and when those are sanded down, you're left with a rather generic fantasy role-playing game. Remastered recaptures just enough of that charm to make it a worthy remaster of one of Bethesda's Game Studios' most beloved games, end quote. Digital Trends were admittedly a little more cynical about this one, making some points that were worth keeping in mind. Quote, maybe it's just a way for Bethesda to keep the Elder Scrolls IP relevant as it toils away on the series' 6th installment for a few years more. It's undoubtedly the kind of well-timed publicity beat that Microsoft craves right now. It feels like a business decision first and foremost, which makes it difficult for me to approach it as a work of art. No matter which version you choose, you'll get the same engrossing RPG that today's open-world games are still looking to as a North Star. One will be funnier to look at, and the other will let you sprint. It's the difference between $35 and a few good mods, end quote. Moving on to the RPG that everyone seemed to very quickly move on to after Oblivion Shadow dropped, Clair Obscure Expedition 33, and it has been absolutely killing it. 500,000 copies sold in the first day, 1 million copies sold in the first 3 days, and a mighty 91 on OpenCritic, giving it the top spot in terms of 2025's highest aggregated scores. You probably heard a lot of praise for this one if you've been on social media. It looks great, somehow managing to freshen up the turn-based RPG formula, and it hits some huge swings despite coming from a relatively small development team. Here's Eurogamer, who gave it 4 out of 5, saying, quote, it's an ambitious yet impressive debut from the studio that, despite a somewhat fanciful narrative, is a pensive examination of grief and the power of art. And while the development team has chosen to focus on certain areas to the detriment of others, where it succeeds, it really excels. Clair Obscure may be painting with a limited color palette, but the result is a bold and striking vision, end quote. Now, these two RPGs really overshadowed every other game released this week, at least in our part of the world, but in Japan, people are going absolutely nuts over the 100-line Last Defense Academy, which is the new visual novel and tactics game hybrid put together by two of the genre's most celebrated and ambitious creators. Those who have played it on our side of the fence have a lot of good things to say about it. It's sitting at a mighty 87, which is no mean feat for a visual novel. Digital Trends gave this one 4.5 out of 5, saying, quote, it sets itself apart from its inspirations to deliver an experience experience that's both familiar and fresh. The bloody turn-based tactics, gripping story about saving humanity, and larger-than-life characters make it one of the best RPGs of 2025, end quote. Here's a more pragmatic perspective from RPG Site, who only have a review in progress after 55 hours of play. Quote, I'd only recommend this to people truly looking for a game to invest all their time into. I'm not allowed to mention any specifics on the events after my first playthrough, but I think it's worth mentioning that I found the tonal shifts of the other routes I've stumbled upon to show a tonal flexibility that has been really exciting. My grasp of what 100 Line is aiming for with its 100 endings is to be an exhaustive love letter to the medium of visual novels. Some of the routes I've played so far feel like I've wandered into a completely different video game with the same characters. 100 Line is far from a normal video game, and to truly get the most out of it, you want to try and see and do everything, end quote. Moving on from RPGs to fighting games, Fatal Fury City of the Wolves also came out last week, the first entry in the longtime Street Fighter rival in 26 years. It's sitting at a strong 81 on OpenCritic, with most critics pegging it as a solid fighting game with some great core mechanics, but a bit lacking in the frills department. IGN's resident fighting games guy Mitch Saltzman scored this one 8 out of 10, saying, quote, when it comes to almost all of the most important parts of a fighting game, Fatal Fury City of the Wolves is up there with the best of the genre. Its fighting system is a wonderful update to the classic SNK style of one-on-one combat that feels similar to Street Fighter 6, but just different enough to exist as an alternative to it. The roster of 17 is varied and interesting, even with the strained addition of 2 real-life guest characters, and its netcode, while not on the same level as games like Street Fighter 6 and Guilty Gear Strive, is at least relatively close to it. Many things around that rock-solid center are a bit behind the times, from the bare minimum teaching tools to an ugly menu UI that can be frustrating to engage with. But while that means Fatal Fury has some cobwebs to shake off from its 25-year hibernation, the end result is still an excellent return to the fighting game scene, end quote. Moving on to RTS now, and Tempest Rising came out last week as a sort of spiritual successor to Command & Conquer, which is great because it's clear EA aren't doing much with the franchise these days, though they did release the source code for the old games earlier this year, which is a really nice move from them. Anyway, Tempest Rising seems to have landed pretty damn well, a strong 79 on OpenCritic. PC Gamer scored this one 85, saying, quote, Tempest Rising is as good as you could hope a CNC successor to be. I say this with enthusiasm, but also relief. The RTS has been in active retreat for years now, with strategy gaming pushing overwhelmingly toward turn-based tactics and grander 4X affairs. There have been several attempted counteroffensives, but none have succeeded. Rather than try any bold new gambits, Tempest Rising digs its heels in, mounting a stalwart defense of everything that made the RTS great in the first place. It may not revolutionize the genre, but apart from that, Tempest Rising is exactly what the RTS genre needs right now, end quote. Last one we'll cover this week is a goofy immersive sim game that Ed was very excited about. It's called Skin Deep. It comes from Annapurna Interactive and Blendo Games. A couple of relatively reserved takes here, but the ones who loved it really seemed to get into this one, praising the interplay of its simulated elements and its strong sense of voice. Here's Games Radar, who scored it 4.5 out of 5, saying, quote, at times, it feels like you're playing a game set in the Red Dwarf universe, end quote. Pretty high praise, depending on your sense of humor, of course. All right, so what's coming out this week? Very quiet week this week, but a handful of indies have seized the chance for the spotlight. First one is Shotgun Cop Man from Devolver Digital, which is coming out on May 1st for PC and Switch. The developer behind this one is the same outfit that produced My Friend Pedro, and it's another side-scrolling shooter, only this time it's more of a precision platformer as you use a variety of weapons to propel yourself through stages to arrest Satan? That's what it says. Also on May 1st is an interesting looking game called Free Ride, which has a really cool looking hook. It's like a charming PS1 throwback action adventure. It revolves around using telekinesis to help people or cause havoc, but also bills itself as a personality test. Like apparently everything you do or don't do in the game will affect a final assessment of just how much of an asshole or how nice you are, which I guess is a way of categorizing its 16 different endings with big encouragement to replay. PC only for this one. Jumping over to next week, and on the 6th of May, we've got Among Us 3D, which is basically the VR version of Among Us adapted for flat screens. You know what this game is? It took the world over during COVID. PC only for this one, though we can no doubt expect it to arrive on consoles at some point in the future. And finally, an interesting looking PC early access title is dropping on May 7th called Survival Machine. You ever see that Peter Jackson movie Mortal Engines and think, hell yeah, the one where people were living on like giant moving castles and forts on wheels and drive around the desert? This is basically that. It's a survival crafting game where your base is on the move. It's got 4-player co-op, and the last demo seemed to get a lot of people interested in it. And that's everything coming out this week. Well, not quite actually. We did keep one more in reserve, so put this on your radar.
¡Carajo, mierda! Loco, ándate a jugar más allá, ya nos arruinaste todo.
This unique looking game is called Despelote, and it's being put out by Panic, who put out Thank Goodness You're Here and Untitled Goose Game, which is one hell of a track record. On a surface level, it's a first-person game about a soccer-obsessed kid with a really nice analog kicking mechanic and a handful of sandboxes to play around with those kicking skills in little mini-games or impromptu soccer matches, but it's also more than that. It's actually a semi-autobiographical memoir of the developer's experience growing up in Ecuador, specifically around 2001, when it seemed like the national soccer team might actually qualify for the World Cup against all odds, and the whole country suddenly united and became absolutely obsessed with football. It's kind of like a documentary in video game form, and while that might sound a bit dry, Ed has played this one, and he thinks it's actually a pretty special experience and definitely one of a kind. Adding to that, Despelote was nominated for several awards earlier this year at the Independent Games Festival that runs parallel to GDC. It took out the trophy for excellence in audio, was also up for awards in narrative, innovation, as well as the grand prize. It's out on May 1st for all platforms. If you'd like to check it out, we've left a link to it over on our Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This in Your Radar stuff we've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and over on the Epic Games Store, you still have time to grab Shukul, which is the delightfully charming adventure game from Animata Design. They were the ones that did Botanicula, which was also a freebie the week before. Next week, Epic's offering up Super Space Club, which is kind of like an arcade shoot 'em up with a lo-fi hip-hop vibe. We don't yet have word what's headed to Xbox Game Pass this week, but we did get the PS Plus lineup for May just as we were wrapping this script. The headline act, Balatro, or Balatro as we've been told to call it. Man, I pity the fool who steps into this one unawares. Be prepared to lose a significant portion of your life to this video game. Backing it up is Ark Survival Ascendant, which is the remaster of Ark Survival Evolved. Same game, same bugs, half the performance. You're welcome. Capping things off is the excellent Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun. It's a simple but very well made boomer shooter set in the 40k universe, and it does actually tie in with the Space Marine 2 storyline if you're someone trying to keep up with all the lore. It's very good. I loved it, so do check it out, even if you're not a Warhammer fan, because it's just a good time. We missed this one last week, but Nintendo added one new game to its Game Boy Advance roster, Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones, which is a nice little turn-based tactics game suited for portable play. And finally, Apple Arcade is getting a new exclusive this week from the folks who made the comedy game What the Golf, and it's a competitive multiplayer game called What the Clash, where you're going head-to-head with another player in quick-fire games, mashing up modifiers that transform the rules in dumb, fun ways. Imagine like shooting archery targets, but firing wobbly giraffes, and you're most of the way there. Our feel-good story of the week kind of relates to some big news that we didn't cover earlier in the show. Switch 2 pre-orders. They actually went live in a number of regions last week, and I personally found it to be a very strange feeling standing in the middle of Kojima Productions, surrounded by Americans and Japanese all anxiously trying to get their pre-orders in. Since pre-orders in Australia went live weeks ago, and hell, you can still pre-order one like right now without any difficulty. But it was hard for my American brethren. In fact, Jeff Keighley was in the same room as me at Kojima Productions when he tweeted out his frustration, saying, quote, "Man, at Target is brutal for Switch 2 pre-orders. System was in my cart, then it wasn't, then it was, wouldn't let me pay, etc." End quote. Target getting the big Jeff Keighley at there. Don't think they'll be buying any ad slots at the next Game Awards. Balatro creator Local Thunk was going through it with a different retailer. He posted on Blue Sky a picture of a blank webpage with the caption, "Best Buy, don't dare do me like this." Sadly, he ultimately missed out on a pre-order, writing, quote, "Welp, no dice, looks like just my OG Switch for me," end quote. The Switch 2 pre-order process. Now there's a genuine gambling experience. But the most bittersweet miss was spotted by Automaton, and it was for Yuichi Nakamura, who you probably don't know, but plenty of Japanese people do know because he's the guy who voices all of the Japanese Nintendo Directs. Even this guy could not get a Switch 2 pre-order, jokingly tweeting out that he would cut ties with anyone who managed to score one. Enter Masahiro Sakurai of Kirby and Smash Bros. Fame, who responded, playfully taunting him that he'd managed to secure a pre-order and that he wanted to erase Nakamura's memory so that he forgets his promise to cut ties. Sure enough, Sakurai met Nakamura in person to give him an old-fashioned Men in Black memory wipe, which may or may not have involved a karaoke mic in place of an actual neuralizer. Will Nakamura mention the failed pre-order attempt in the next Nintendo Direct? Man, I hope not for his sake. Otherwise, he's going to want a real neuralizer after Nintendo's lawyers are through with him. All right, ladies and gents, that's our show for the week. I'm still working through Clair Obscure since I had a huge amount of stuff to get through after I got back from Japan. And I'm also checking out Ark Raiders this weekend. Truth is, I played that one a while back in one of its earlier technical tests, and I quite liked it. So I'm actually really keen to see how far it's come since then. Like I said, that Death Stranding 2 preview is next week, so if you want to know the minute that goes live, be sure to subscribe, ding that notification bell, and if you've got a minute, I'd love it if you could drop this video a like, since that always helps out bigly. By the way, don't forget that you can now get all Skill Up content over on Spotify, ad-free if you're a Spotify premium subscriber, so be sure to follow me over there if you're keen. Thanks again for stopping by, and a big thanks to this week's sponsor, SteelSeries. SteelSeries. If you've been around these parts before, you've no doubt seen them. Channel partner 4 years running now, SteelSeries put out the absolute best PC peripherals on the market, full stop. Keyboards, headsets, mice, and more, whatever SteelSeries puts out, they aim to dominate that category, and they always manage to pull it off. Their range of keyboards is the perfect example. Their Apex lineup comes in a range of different form factors from full-size to mini, cable to wireless, with plenty of switch types to choose from as well. Last year, that lineup got a big boost when SteelSeries released their Apex Pro TKL Gen 3, the fastest and most responsive and most customizable keyboard that money can buy. It's the keyboard that I personally use, but I think I'm gonna have to change, because just last month, SteelSeries released an all-white version of this thing, and I'm not gonna lie, I need this on my desk ASAP. It's not all about the looks with this thing though. The Apex Pro TKL Gen 3 is so smart that it can detect which game you're playing and apply a custom preset to it, which will automatically tweak the settings of your keyboard for maximum responsiveness for the keys that matter, while reducing the actuation of other keys in case you accidentally press them. That's all possible thanks to SteelSeries' OmniPoint 3.0, the latest iteration in their proprietary tech that delivers fully customizable switches, allowing you to decide how responsive they are. OmniPoint keys are 11 times faster to respond and 20 times faster to actuate than standard mechanical switches, meaning that if split-second key presses matter to you, nothing does it better than this keyboard. The build quality is also unmatched, with sound dampening foam for quieter clicks and the reliability you've come to expect from SteelSeries. Plenty of bells and whistles on this thing too, featuring a customizable display screen that can showcase a range of information at a glance, as well as per-key RGB, meaning you can get a look and effect that matches your setup. It's yet another example of SteelSeries staying at the absolute bleeding edge of both peripheral technology and design, and that is why they have the reputation they do. The white edition of this thing released just last month, and it's selling really fast, so if you have been eyeing a keyboard upgrade, then this is the perfect time to jump in. Best of all, you can get a 12% discount on it and anything else on the SteelSeries.com website when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. That's 12% off with offer code SKILLUP over at SteelSeries.com. Do get in quick, because SteelSeries' new product launches always sell out. Thanks SteelSeries for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.